Good evening, all, and welcome to the Rangers Rabble podcast. It's JD here, Jamie Duff, and we are probably a little late in our breaking news podcast. Usually we like to get out within 15 minutes, 20 minutes when it happens, but we were caught untoward. I don't think we thought it was going to land, around 7 p.m. UK time there. So we have just announced, an hour ago, the loan signing, James Sands from New York City FC. And I am so happy to say you've got a new guest. There's a new, beautiful face on. Now, we'll get to this at the end for a bit of a laugh, but I don't know if some of us may have already heard Tom on the radio earlier on. So I think Tom's been given that good old Glasgow welcome on Twitter. So we'll be a lot more kinder to you, Tom. But I've got Tom Bogert on here. Tom, apologise if I pronounced your name incorrectly.
You got it right.
Tom Bogert's on. Brilliant. And Tom, you are a freelance writer, journalist. And I mean, I was looking at your Twitter. You've got quite a lot of followers on there. And you've done some writing for 442, The Guardian Sport and stuff. MLS is your big thing.
Yeah. MLS is where you'll find me on a regular basis. And first off, right off the jump, an apology that you're not getting the patented mustache as is usual. It's the off season for me too here around MLS. So, you got to change it up and make, the auto suggestion, make people miss it. And then the mustache will be back soon. But this isn't normally what comes out. It usually is much dumber than what I'm already am.
You're a lot younger than what I thought you were, because when I
mustache would help me look a little older too.
I seen your Twitter, I was like,
today, so look, I look
he's got a killer mustache. He's got a killer mustache. When you come on there, I was like, it's a young dude. Anyway, so we're going to kick off. I just want to say before we continue, we have a lot of our regulars in the comments and stuff like that, and just welcome and thank you for everyone for joining us as per usual. We will try and get to some questions at the end for Tom, just so we can, anything anyone wants to ask, hit me with a question and I'll send it up there. Any comments we have, Tom, you'll see comments fly up every now and again. If we need to chat about the comment, I'll pull you into it. If not, sometimes we'll just put up some comments, just some people's thoughts, so we can see what other people are thinking. But we'll just continue to chat, and we'll ask some questions, and I'll just let you tell us a wee bit about James. Just thanks for everybody for joining. We're live on YouTube, and we're live, I think it's on Facebook as well. Now our Facebook's up and running. Of course, we have our Patreon on the go as well for any members that wish to join that. And yeah, let's kick off. So 21-year-old, I don't want to actually take your thunder here. So James Sands, 21-year-old American internationals. We're going to call it footballer. Okay, that's one of the ground rules, Tom. All right. I've seen someone commenting on Twitter. Did they go off on you because you called it soccer?
I didn't. That was one of the things I was kind of on the fence about. I was like, should I lean into the talking soccer here from an American, or do I sound disingenuous, like I'm pandering, trying to call it football? So I just avoided the word altogether.
Don't know what, Tom. You can call it whatever you wish, and if it's soccer for you, it's soccer for us tonight. So first, I was going to ask you, 21-year-old James Sands, quite a young guy. So he's signed in an 18-month loan deal, and Rangers have an exclusive buy option at the end of it. So just tell us a little bit about James.
Yeah, so James, it's funny that referring to him as young, because he obviously is at 21 years old, but he's been in every game starter for NYCFC for the past 3 years. So it's almost, difficult to remind myself that he's only 21, and he turned 21 in the summer. So, he started last season as a 20-year-old. He's been this kid who's been a known commodity for a long time. He was the first academy graduate to sign a first-team deal with NYCFC, a club that, played their first game in 2015. I know that's, huge history when I'm talking to somebody from Scottish football of a club that's been in existence for 6.5 years. But yeah, so this is really monumentous for this team. This is the first academy product that was signed. He's not the first to leave. Joe Scally came through NYCFC. He's playing at Borussia Mönchengladbach right now. Gio Reyna spent like 12 years old to 15 or 16 before he went to Dortmund. He wasn't just there for a season. He was helped be produced by NYCFC's academy. So Sands is the latest. They already have a little bit of pedigree, but it is special that this is the first player that was in the first team. The first player signed to the first team is moving on and kind of completing this cycle.
Yeah, we'll touch on, because I'd seen a tweet you'd put out earlier on about the Gio Reyna and who has got unbelievable links to our club. never mind his father and his name. But there is quite similarities between some moves that have happened with our club in the last few days, which has probably spurred on James's move to Rangers. I've seen quite a lot. 6'1", James Sands, as you're saying, 21, American internationalist, 6 foot.
I think that he took a book out of Tinder. He all of a sudden went from 5'10" to 6 foot on his player page. So maybe he had a late growth spurt, or maybe some of his mates said, why don't you just say you're 6 feet tall? Or maybe NYCFC. But there are some questions about whether it's 6'1", or maybe if it's really 5'10".
That is so funny. I do that sometimes. Anyway, positional wise, so we've heard a lot, and this is something I mentioned last night in my podcast. Versatility. Now, sometimes that's frowned upon, snobbery in football or soccer. If he doesn't have a specialist subject, well, he's a kind of utility player, they call it. But James seems to be very versatile. Position wise, where can he play?
Yeah, so I think that his best position is a center back in a back three, where he can play as the lead ball player, the lead, starting possessions, and kind of that deep lying playmaker, if you want to call it that. But for teams that play in a back four, he can play center back in a back four. I don't love him there. I think that he's better as a defensive mid when a team is playing with a back four. He's just a really clean, really strong, really solid number 6. He's somebody who tactically he's an A+. Like, there's no good way to quantify what his positional sense is. There's no good way to quantify how intelligent he is. And just the things he does, he's somebody who I kind of got slated for this a little bit before, but like, you kind of don't notice how great he is because of just all the little things he does. And then you look back 5 games later and you're like, wait a minute, I don't think this kid has made a mistake in the last, month. Let's look at his performances closer. Because again, he's not banging shots from 40 yards out. He's not, splitting a 45-yard diagonal through ball, though he's capable of playing very well in possession. But again, it's not like this crazy ability that jumps off the screen. He's just such a good player and such a smart player, and he's somebody who's so useful to successful teams.
I'll quickly fire a quick question in. Tom, C. James, one of our regulars, left or right centre back. I'm led to believe he's a right centre back. Is that correct?
Yeah, right centre back.
Yeah,
but again, if it's a back four, I do hope that Rangers play him as a 6. In reporting on this move, I've talked to people. I haven't gotten any clarity of where Giovanni Van Bronckhorst sees him. I haven't gotten any kind of clarity on, there is the speculation of the right back you guys sold, Patterson.
Yeah,
there was some speculation because Sands, displayed for the first time in his career, was asked to play right back in an emergency for 4 or 5 games, and some fans were saying, "Oh, I see that he's played right back before. Maybe he's the backup or whatever, or the replacement, or somebody who can do that," as dogs run here. They're very interested in what I'm saying, apparently. But yeah, he's somebody, I guess, who showed the ability to play as a right back. But I really hope that he plays either defensive mid first and foremost, or as a center back.
Yeah, we play a back four. We did the last couple of days. Nathan Patterson's signed for
Everton.
He has. Nathan Patterson signed for Everton for up to 16 million. So I think the initial thoughts were, we've got a really great, our captain's our right back, and his numbers he posts is unbelievable. Yep. So we probably need someone who could fill in there for 3 or 4 games a season. It looks like James could be that person. We have other people who could do that job as well, but I don't see Rangers playing with 3 at the back. I looked at a couple of clips last night. And you know what YouTube clips are like? It's always spectacular, but his range of passing from a defensive midfield, some of it was spectacular.
Yeah, he's somebody who can initiate possession, and it's a very important quality. He makes the right decision all of the time. I keep coming back to this. Is his level of maturity, his level of poise, and his decision making and intelligence is off the charts. He's not somebody who's, this crazy physical specimen. He doesn't have this insane level of pace. So it takes a little while to notice that, he just always does the right thing, and he just always plays the right pass. And it's just something that you come to expect after watching him, and you kind of take it for granted. And this is why this kid is a special player, in the sense that if you dropped him into the middle of a mid-table Bundesliga team tomorrow, I could see him starting and being fine. If you dropped him into the Europa League tie against Dortmund, I think that he'd survive and figure it out if that was his debut. He's somebody who I have the utmost confidence in to, raise his level and to somebody who can fit in and adapt and figure things out.
Yeah, I think there's a level of, seems to be a kind of new age player, Tom, and I'd fully expect this coming from the States. There's a real level of intelligence within footballers these days, and I think James maybe fits that mould, which means he can try different positions. Rangers have a really probably my favourite player just now, Glenn Camara, a Finnish internationalist who came through the Arsenal Youth Academy, and Rangers signed him for like £50,000 3 years ago.
Yeah.
He's now technically unbelievable, and everything you're telling me is what I think of Glenn Camara. Does all the great things so quietly and so confidently and so poised. I'm sitting here thinking that James is possibly a replacement for Glenn long term in that number 6 position. If you think that would probably, although you're saying that in a back 3 would be his best position, if Rangers don't play that, he's equally going to be as good at the DMC.
Yeah. That, and again, in a back 4, I really hope that that's the plan to play him, and that would make sense. Everything you say, that he would be like the long-term replacement for Camara. And again, like, I think that the best way to kind of understate or highlight how well he's thought of and how quickly people learn to trust him and appreciate him is that he made his debut under Patrick Vieira. Patrick Vieira was the NYCFC manager and very quickly elevated him to the first team and got him his debut. The next year, the head coach was Dome Torrent, Pep Guardiola's longtime assistant. It did not take long. It was like 3 games into the season, and it was apparent that James Sands was going to start every single game he was fit for. Dome only lasted a season, or a season and a half, rather, after Vieira took the Lille job, I believe. Not Lille. The Nice job. Yeah. And then Ronnie Dyla came in, and immediately he was starting every game under Ronnie Dyla. And same thing with Dome Torrent. If there was a back 3, he'd go play center back. If it was a back 4, he'd go play defensive midfield. Or if there was 2 center backs were out, he would go play in a back 4 as a center back. He's a first name on the team sheet because he just makes everything better. And he's just somebody you can rely upon. And again, this was when he was 18, 19, and 20 years old. Like, we're only kind of scratching like where his ability is going to grow and where he's going to be. And I think that this was the perfect time for his move to Europe.
So I was going to ask you that. Is there any? I take it there has been chat around him, perhaps leaving earlier. And you're saying that he's played there for 3 seasons. So do you think that the 3 seasons has gave him the perfect? And this is almost the perfect storm, perfect timing for James to go into European football.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been reporting on him for a while. Like, I wrote something on him a year ago, and then just talking to people, it was like the quiet expectation was no later than this winter. The global pandemic was something that obviously always, altered plans, and it was difficult for money and offers to be there. I don't believe that there was a lot of interest in him from, Germany, Belgium, and Netherlands. I hadn't heard of Rangers until this window, but he's had a lot of teams following him, and he's been on the radar. I haven't heard until this offseason of, real offers and okay, this might actually really happen right now. So I think it really was the perfect storm, and the timing is right. Like, he just proved another season in the league. Like, he doesn't have much else to prove. He doesn't have much else to develop here. They just won the league. He lifted at the club's first ever trophy for his boyhood club. And after he could have left for free this winter. His contract was set to expire right now. And last offseason, he agreed to a 5-year contract as hey, I appreciate everything the club has done for me. And I trust you guys will move me on if the right opportunity comes up. So that's why I've been saying for months, I'd be shocked if he was still on the roster for 2022. And 5 days into the January transfer window, he's gone.
That's why he's done it, and it's good morals from a young guy. Knowing, I mean, they've developed him into the player he is. And you've mentioned some of the names. I mean, if he's been coached or even been anywhere near Patrick Vieira and can play the 6 role, there wasn't many better than that. I think it's a massive thing that he leaves a champion. I think there's a big thing about players coming to play with Glasgow Rangers, and however people feel about the SPL, playing for a club that's this year 150 years old, who only accept winning and want to be champions every year. And we've had some bad times over the last years. We don't want to speak about them, but we're back being the champions. And do you think Tom winning and becoming a champion himself will give him a right foundation to come into a club where that's what has to happen every year?
Yeah, that I completely agree with that. There is something to be said about a player who wins. And look, if if he didn't win the title this year, it wouldn't have been his fault and it wouldn't have been a knock on his profile. But just having that in your bag, having these big games kind of on his resume and these big experiences, and there's nothing that he's experienced that's going to be like going to Rangers and say the first time that he plays a game against Celtic. Like there's nothing that can prepare you for that in MLS in America. But he did play for the national team in the Gold Cup, our version of the Euros. Granted, like it was mostly our second team because the way we split it up with all the competitions, but he won the Gold Cup. They beat Mexico in the final. He played a number of games of the Gold Cup. So in the summer he won, in the winter he won, and now he's going to Rangers where they're in a title chase, and the expectation is that you win the title, and he's going to be in Europa League games, and the expectation is they keep advancing. So I think that these are all good things. And again, it wouldn't be an indictment if he came here if they lost the Gold Cup final to Mexico, or if they lost in the MLS final to Portland. But it's just something other that's important for a player to have, and these experiences and this mindset and mentality.
I'm going to jump a little bit because one of our members, actually, Wilf, who's one of our contributors in the podcast, asked a question. Now, I know the answer to this, but you're talking about confidence and mindset and mentality. Now, going from, is it 10, 11,000? Is it the Yankee Stadium?
Stadium. Yeah, so he won't be playing on a baseball field anymore, and that's very good. I'm excited about that. Yeah.
And how do you think now every second week he'll be playing in front of 45, 48,000 fans? We spoke about maturity and stuff. I think he'll be able to handle that.
Yeah, I have no doubt that he will. His professional debut was like, it was a friendly in his first preseason with the team when he was 17 or whatever. It was in front of like 60,000 in Brazil, and everybody I've talked to from that day was like, I think that's when we knew that he was going to be special, because we knew he had the talent, we knew he had the technical ability, we knew that physically he was going to be able to adapt it and be a professional. But like just watching him, even in a friendly where it's not something that you necessarily get up for, it's not something that you live or die by, but the atmosphere was still pretty wild, and he was just calm, and he was just good, and he was somebody who showed pretty quickly that he was going to be able to adapt these scenarios. When we go back to MLS Cup, there was, I think, 30,000 in Portland, and Portland is one of the very top atmospheres in MLS, and he adapted well, played well, and they won. And then there was, World Cup qualifying in CONCACAF is very difficult. He went on the road to Honduras. They didn't have a full stadium because of COVID requirements, but that's still one hell of a hectic place to play. And he wasn't perfect on his debut, but he was fine.
Ability-wise, you've been very complimentary about him. Do you think he has the ability, you kind of answered this, but have the ability to come straight in? Now, we don't know. We're expecting, it might take time for him to bed in, but would you expect him to be able to come in and be in play straight away? Could he affect it first team?
Yeah, so I would kick that back to you, just in that I'm not, expertly sure where the first team depth chart sits and what the expectations are for him. I think that it's probably likely that they'll take it a little slow or whatever. Maybe maybe his debut is a home game in a lower table team or whatever. But again, I think his best quality is his adaptability and intelligence. So that's one part of him that I'm not really worried about.
I'll apologise. I don't watch many MLS games other than the goals we see.
It's okay.
the goals we see on Sky. However, Rangers obviously dominate every single game we play in, possession-wise. Is that similar to New York City, and that then will suit James's game? Yeah,
Ronnie Dyla favored. They were 1 second. Oh, sorry, dogs hear something else.
No, that was because you've mentioned Ronnie Dyla.
Yeah, Ronnie Dyla's sides. They like to dominate possession. They had, the advanced metrics or whatever. They had the most time spent in possession against a structured defense. So I'd imagine that's how Rangers would play often too, in dominating the ball and teams packing the back. That's something that he's used to. They had the most, then this wouldn't necessarily be all or him or even him being the driving force, but they had the most chances created against a set defense. And again, he's somebody who's going to be used to unlocking, not necessarily, he's the pass before the pass kind of a player. He's not a 10 that's going to play the last ball, but he initiates the possession sequences. He He gets the ball quickly to, the playmakers or, big switches to the fullbacks. And I think that that's going to be somewhere where he's comfortable. And again, as you say, it's something that he's used to playing. And MLS, there's a lot more parity, obviously, than Scotland. So they didn't play every single game where they're dominant. They didn't play every single game with 60% possession, but he's definitely no stranger to that.
You spoke earlier about this being a monumental, and you tweeted about it. I was reading it earlier on about the monumental moment for New York City. It's their first ever homegrown signing. Take him through. He's won things. Is there a real? And I know we have, or you have had the other Reina and Scally that had left before.
Yep.
Is there a? Now they are homegrown, but because Sands has played first team 3 years, won things. Is there a bigger kind of feeling for James Sands? And is there a bit of sadness that he's leaving, or do the MLS fans see that as a celebration?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak, I guess, for the biggest NYCFC fans. I think that obviously they would love to have him there his whole career, but the vast majority of MLS fans understand the reality, and that they're proud. They're excited to watch him go in Europe, even though Gio Reyna never made his first team debut because he ended up just signing with Dortmund instead. They root him on. They claim him as academy product. Joe Scally, he agreed. Mönchengladbach agreed a deal to buy him before he made his professional debut. He signed a contract with NYCFC, but so this is just a different level. And Scally, I think, only made 5 starts maybe for NYCFC. So these are guys who were produced by NYCFC. These are guys that fans felt a connection to, but there's nothing quite like with James Sands, as you say. He played 3 seasons and he won the MLS Cup. Like, this is a new level. This is a different level, and this is, again, he was the first player in the first team from the academy. Like, this is always, they're going to point to this as the absolute A+ elite expectation or best case scenario anytime that some kid is signed from the academy. You could be James Sands. You can come into the first team, play for a few years, hopefully win some stuff. We're going to be a competitive team, and then we're not going to stand in your way when the right move, like a move to Rangers, a move to Borussia Mönchengladbach, goes your way. So I think that this is definitely the one that would pull on the fans' heartstrings the most.
I think this touches on it. Now, you mentioned earlier you're a big Liverpool fan, so don't say he's like Steven Gerrard, please. But who could we, if we're thinking, who could we compare him to? Because you obviously know your European football and your English football as well. Who can we compare him to?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm trying to think of a kind of cerebral player, somebody who does the work. Like, because of Liverpool, the connection, the James Milner thought has come to me, but I don't think that comp is very well, because they have a similar motor, but James Milner covers ground like nobody else in the world and does some different things. I'm trying to think who's a defensive midfielder that is really clean in possession and really sound defensively. I feel like I've done enough talking about this that I should have.
Declan Rice, I don't know.
I think that's a good one. That's a really good one. Declan Rice is a really good one. And again, I struggle when doing these comparison things, because I don't want to give the expectation off as the dumb, the American who's look at our player who is like England's starting center mid. Like, he's not obviously at that level, but the play style is similar. The motor, the everything he does gets stuck in. I think Declan covers more ground and is more of a bit of a physical force when he plays for West Ham. But I think Declan Rice is a pretty good comparison.
Yeah, I think James sounds really cultured, and you should have a chance to watch a little bit of Glenn Camara, Tom. I think James Sands sounds very similar now. That might sadden a few people, but Glenn Kamara's time's approaching to go to the EPL, and Rangers are going to command a massive, massive fee. You're talking 20-25 and upwards for Glenn. Do we know, or have you heard of any values of what the exclusivity to buy deal will be at the end of the 18 months, Tom?
Annoyingly not. I thought that by the time that this went official, I would have heard something, but I think that they're keeping that under wraps. The only thing that I've heard is described to me as it's going to be a high purchase option, and the rationale behind this being a loan with purchase option is that whatever his value is right now to clubs in Europe, NYCFC believe that it will grow once he gets to a club like Rangers, and they also believe that once he gets in the training facility for a few weeks at Rangers, are going to value him a lot more in 4 weeks from now than they do right now. In the sense that NYCFC's belief that they're going to see everything that they liked about him on film and in scouting. It's going to be confirmed, and then there's just going to be the human element, the intangible element, the things that maybe they weren't totally aware of, that they're going to say, okay, like this is everything we hope for, and we can see the room to grow. So the purchase option again has been described to me as pretty sizable. I don't even want to go speculating, but I can't. I mean, Daryl Dike to West Brom was 9.5 million US. Like maybe in that region, maybe a little less. Like if you look at, I'm trying to think of center mids who have been sold by MLS clubs. Gianluca Busio went from Kansas City to Venezia for $6.5 million up front. That with in a package that could grow to like 11 million. Brian Reynolds went from Dallas to Roma for $8.5 million. Like anything in that kind of 6 to 10 million range, as they clearly didn't want me speculating and tried to stop me.
Tom, our watchers know there's not a Rangers Rabble podcast without a dog or making really weird sounds in the background, like sounds you wouldn't want your dog to make. Anyway, you touch on MLS, folks. Just before we continue, look, thanks for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already done so. A like on YouTube, it goes a massive way of getting the interviews out and stuff like that. And go away, come back in 10-15 minutes and add a little comment in. Martin's found a little bit of analytics. That helps as well. So anything to get us out there would really help. And we thank Tom for coming on. We're probably going to have another 5 minutes and then I'm going to open up to a couple of questions. You touched on MLS there, Tom, and players leaving the MLS and going to Europe seems to be the pinnacle. Now, I had a big rant yesterday, and the people who watched me last night, I had a bit of a rant because I went onto Twitter right away and I seen a few disparaging comments about the SPL. Now, most of the Rangers fans would agree the SPL is very poor standard, but the standard for playing for Rangers, I would expect to be way higher than the MLS. Rangers fans will tell you we are top 3 EPL teams. That's what we are. If we had the same finance, but I've seen a lot of players, a lot of people, just like they'd rather they went to the Bundesliga, or they would rather they would go there. What do you think personally about the move to Scottish football for James?
I would only be excited about it if it was Rangers or Celtic. I think that some of the ignorance, and it does go both ways. I get a lot of anti-MLS comments from Scottish fans in the past, but I think part of it is that MLS fans look at the league and they like the bottom half of the league is obviously not of great standard, and like you said, it is very different playing for Rangers than it is playing for any other team. But you look at Christian Ramirez for Aberdeen, I think he's up to 10 goals or something like that. He was on the bench for one of the very worst MLS teams, like couldn't get on the field for a while. And this, I believe that Christian Ramirez is a good MLS player, or at least a standard MLS player, but he was being benched by one of the worst teams in the league. He goes to Aberdeen and immediately there was a list either by the Guardian or someone else that he was the 16th best player in Scotland. Like, I think that's where some of it comes from, is they say, wait a minute, like this guy who couldn't get on the field for Houston is again, was one of the worst teams in the league and one of the, particularly attacking wise, they were just, they could use a player like that. But he was somebody who was benched, and then he comes to Scotland and is doing really well. So I think that's where it comes from. But like you say, I think it's the difference between Rangers and just playing for any other team. And it's the same way with, Tajon Buchanan, a Canadian international, is going to Club Brugge. I think that's a good move, and most people do too. But the bottom half of the Belgian league is probably similar to the bottom half of the Scottish league. And you look at Brendan Aronson went to Red Bull Salzburg. I think the bottom half of the Scottish league is better than the bottom half of the Austrian league. And there isn't the same Rangers Celtic as there is with Salzburg, just Salzburg. So, we were excited about all of those moves. And I think that the only fear is that Rangers, and as the fans view it, and as the team views it, a destination club. I think that the only difference is that Club Brugge, Genk, Red Bull Salzburg, these are clubs that the idea is 2 or 3 years you move them on. So I think that's the only reason why fans aren't entirely in love with that. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned Christian Ramirez, because he's been put out there a few times. I've seen it, and the people in the comments won't like this, or the guys watching, but we do a best of the rest podcast where we watch it's everything other than Rangers. So we look at all the other Scottish games, and we've done our half season, team of the season, team of the half season, and all 3 of us put Christian Ramirez in. Nice. And I think Scottish football suits Christian Ramirez. Big, physical, and Yeah, so he's doing really well.
Yeah.
What do you think is it with Rangers? We do have some sort of really, I mean, Claudio Reyna, DeMarcus Beasley, Bocanegra, Mo Edu, Emerson Hyndman, Gideon
Gideon
Zalame,
Zelam, yeah.
among Bedoya, Polster. We've always had a really, an attraction or a link, and we've brought players over. And I mean, Claudio Reyna. I mean, there's not more of a technically gifted player, or a more versatile player than we've ever had for a long, long time. But Rangers seem to have this draw, and I take it's what you're saying is that people in America know it's a big club.
Yeah, so yeah, there are a lot of, I guess, American fans who have a soft place in their heart for Rangers, and like any other, like I'm sure if people in Scotland are looking at, say, other leagues where you look at Real Madrid or Barcelona or Bayern Munich, Dortmund, like you look at some of these leagues with two dominant teams and you kind of lean one way or the other. There are obviously so many Celtic fans in the United States as well, but there are people who, if they didn't have another reason, they think like, oh, DeMarcus Beasley, Mo Edu, they look at Claudio Reyna, all these, like, there is a connection to America from Rangers that is something that's not lost on fans. And then, like, I do like that James Sands is going to continue this, because look, I like Matt Polster didn't work at Rangers. I think that I think he's a very good player, and since he's come back to MLS, he's been very, very good. But like, there hasn't been that bigger successful American at this club for a little while. Maybe was Mo Edu the last one, or Ali Bedoya was the last one.
Yeah,
and that's about a decade long. And again, with that kind of pedigree of Americans coming to Rangers, like, it's nice to see that being continued. And I think that again, Polster's been very good in MLS. James Sands is another level. It's a different type of talent.
So that's good to hear. Like, a lot of people were saying there's perhaps a Matt Polster-esque type player, and I was like, well, So quickly, let's talk about James Sands. You said we could drop James Sands into the Dortmund game. Gio Reyna would probably be playing. I just see a lot of similarities. I know we've spoke about it with Rangers and New York City with that, because Gio Reyna seems to be the Billy Gilmore, where Billy Gilmore plays with Norwich on loan from Chelsea. So Gio Reyna was the starlet who didn't really play and moved on when he was 15, 16, something like that.
Yeah, 16 when he was, because he has a European passport.
Yeah, well, of course. And Billy Gilmore was a Rangers graduate from 5-year-old, whenever it was, and then left to Chelsea.
Yep.
Whereas James Sands, for the NYC guys, is the player who played games and came through. And it's almost a little bit like the Nathan Patterson one we've just seen, where Nathan has now played a few games and went for big bucks and moved on, and the fans all seem to be really happy and fine with it. So there's a good link there. And obviously the Giovanni Van Bronckhorst is now our manager, who obviously was very, very friendly with with Claudio. I just wonder do you think Claudio had any bearing in the transfer?
I can't say anything with certainty. I'd assume that with that relationship that there would have been a phone call, because Claudio was the sporting director at NYCFC when Sands signed his first pro contract. And obviously his son was playing with James Sands all throughout their youth, or for however many years. So I'm certain that that Claudio has a big opinion and good insight on him. And I'm sure he gave his stamp of approval if and when asked. But Claudio is the sporting director at Austin FC, and he's obviously has enough to do. And there are probably legalities and not allowed to talk about other players or whatever. But yeah, I'm sure that would have been a call that would be helpful.
Folks, there was a lot of questions before whilst me and Tom have been chatting, but we want to get a few questions to Tom for 5 minutes. But so, peeps, if you have had some questions that I've not answered, throw them back in for me, because the comments have been going wild. Everybody's been really enthused with what you're saying, Tom, so thank you for that. My last question to you is, having all these players in Europe, the Americans are flooding the European leagues. Is this all part of the bigger plan to win the 2026 World Cup?
I'm not going to undercut all my credibility by saying that, but I will say that this is the logical step in player development. Around 2009, 2008, there was a huge push by a number of clubs in the league in general to really invest and build up their the academy system, the development system, and we're starting to see the fruits of that. You look at just FC Dallas as a club who have Chris Richards, Weston McKennie, Ricardo Pepi, Brian Reynolds, Reggie Cannon, just off the top of my head, 5, Tanner Tessman, 6 players that are playing in Europe. That's just from one club. You have the Red Bulls, who have obviously sent Tyler Adams, now Kyle Duncan, Aaron Long should be there. All these, like, you can go club by club. Philly with Brendan Aronson and Mark McKenzie. Like 12 years ago, this James Sands move would have been, oh my God, this is incredible. What, like, parading him around in the streets, and we're still celebrating this. But this isn't a random act. This isn't Josie Altidore just being born near the Red Bulls, and oh my God, like, this guy would have been an incredible player no matter where he was born. This was years of development and improving development, and this is the norm now. These are the players that are being kind of produced by MLS and American academies, Canadian academies, and it is cool that after Weston McKennie, Christian Pulisic, Tyler Adams, all these guys came here and had success. It opened up the markets to European clubs looking more seriously at MLS as a regular market rather than just a couple guys who pop up here and there.
It's when you're rhyming off all these names, and people still think the MLS is back in the dark ages, when it certainly is not.
Right.
Some of those names you're mentioning, I think that your national team could have a good chance. It's in, is it home, isn't it? It's in the States.
Yeah. It's 80% of the games are in the United States, and the other 20% are in Mexico and Canada, because they can't just pick. United States isn't big enough to host one tournament. We needed all three.
We've got a question, and I don't want to throw you under the bus here, Tom, but numbers, statistics wise, do you know anything about James Sands?
What do you mean by what statistics?
Turnovers, tackling statistics, goals, anything like that?
He definitely has a high pass completion rate. I'm not sure off the top of my head. He was favorable in distance covered, but that lends itself to anybody who's playing centrally in a team who plays a lot of minutes. I think that it's still difficult to really measure defensive statistics and what is and what isn't valuable. It goes back to the old, was it a Maldini quote saying, if I have to make a tackle, I've done my job poorly or whatever. So again, like, I don't know how to quite quantify his impact defensively, but there's just an intangible / non-quantifiable, version of him that he's somebody who's tactically always in the right spot, and you don't know, you don't really notice him making these last ditch challenges because he's somebody who's usually in the right position. So again, that's not really a good answer, but I don't think that there's a good answer out there for that one.
Obviously, Gio Van Bronckhorst had a little time with the City group. Do you think that's getting any better on it?
I think so. I'd imagine, because he was expected to take the NYCFC job before Ronnie Dylan ended up getting it.
He was.
Yeah, so I'm certain that he has familiarity, and they are the synergy with City Football Group with NYCFC. I think is better than Red Bull Global with the New York Red Bulls. So I think that he would have been well aware of this player, and that's another little facet of this deal that I haven't touched on. I'm glad you bring it up. That Van Bronckhorst really wants him. That's been expressed to me. Like, that's why NYCFC, James Sands camp, they're all super excited about this move, because the manager really wants him, and he should have every opportunity to play, and he should have every chance at a fair share. And if he were to fail, it's not going to be because the environment wasn't right.
Curry Muncher is one of our
good name.
Person who watches our pod all the time, but I know you've answered this earlier on. I don't know if Curry Muncher maybe missed it. He can play in a back four, can't he? He could do that.
Yep.
He's versatile enough.
Yeah. So he would just be in a similar role where he just ball playing center back. Again, I like that better when there are two natural center backs next to him, or more natural. But with Rangers, like, I could see him playing that role when, particularly the games where they're going to dominate possession 70 to 30%. You might not need him in defensive midfield because there aren't going to be that many transition opportunities for the opposition, and another center back next to him who can kind of play as, a deeper role for him where he steps and has somebody to cover him. I think that would work well. Yeah.
Thanks everyone for watching, and Tom, really appreciate it. I know you've been on a few people. You've been a man in the want today, and we touched on it earlier. You've had a bit of stick from the Scottish and the Rangers fans earlier.
Hold on. I'm from New Jersey. That's a language of love. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Very quickly, me joking back around, they said, "I'm glad you took that in stride."
Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. I think you've pacified maybe a few concerns the Rangers fans have had, and we're happy with what you've been telling us. So it sounds all good. What I would say to everybody watching, thanks for that. Really appreciate everyone watching. Please like and subscribe as per usual. We have been super busy this week. There's so much content going on, even though there isn't any football. We're not back until week after. So just thanks everyone for watching, and we will see you soon. And a big thanks to Tom from All at the Rangers Rabbit.
Cheers.